So I know no one will watch this one because it's a horror game related thing and I'm accruing a Nintendo fan base already for my channel, but I still want to talk about the things I want to talk about. Today, it's about Silent Hill 2 Remake and just the little history that went behind this whole thing. Not like a comprehensive YouTube history kind of thing, just my personal history going through the waves of this remake and where we are today with it. So, in case you hadn't heard, let's just put it this way, okay? Like, you never heard of Silent Hill, maybe you're just morbidly curious about just someone else's opinion about a game you never even really heard of or played. Silent Hill 2, original game, I think it's incredible. I played it really, really late into my gaming hobby, so I actually played it for the first time when I was doing it for Boundary Break. That was like literally the first time I ever gotten my hands on Silent Hill 2 and played it, and I was just completely swept away by the aesthetic, the environmental storytelling, and just the overall story itself, just the eeriness and everything. It's far less, in my opinion, about how scary the monsters are, though I think I probably would have been really scared by these monsters had I played it when it first came out, and I wasn't like a 30-something-year-old trying it for the first time. No, I think that it would have been really scary for that, but you know, as an adult, oh my god, there's so much to chew on in terms of what the story does. I think it's the most impressive horror game story I've ever experienced. Someone in the comments section want to tell me a better story for a horror game? I'd love to hear it. I walked away becoming a personal fan of that particular game. Then I tried Silent Hill 3 and I wasn't as impressed. Apparently it's like a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1 or whatever, and I don't really like where the plot goes with Silent Hill 1 and 3. You know, am I a real fan if I don't love those games? Well, then so be it. I really love Silent Hill 2, so I loved that, and I did have some minor complaints, but overall it's still a very playable game to this day. And when they announced that they were going to do a remake for Silent Hill 2, I was like, this is so necessary. The story is absolute gold. Like, it's a gold mine for anyone that owns that IP. It really should be retold. And obviously the graphics could be substantially improved, although I do think that the graphics in the original game hold up fairly well. I think some of the faces look a little weird, but whatever. It's not like the ugliest faces I've ever seen in video games, especially for the PS2 era. I still thought, though, that like the combat was really messy. Like, it was really easy to exploit the combat. It also just kind of didn't feel right, felt a little wonky. And I just thought, you know, if they do anything, I hope that they improve the combat of this game. And I was really happy to see that this wasn't just a reskinned Silent Hill 2. No, this is going to be built from the ground up. It's going to have over-the-shoulder gameplay, so you get to see that classic environment from an all-new perspective. That's huge. And on top of that, the combat is substantially improved. And on top of that, the performances are perfect, pitch perfect. I mean, I wouldn't know that at the time by looking at the trailer, but I still looked at what I saw and I was like, this is really impressive. Like, this looks like a really good looking remake. Not apparently the popular opinion at the time. When the first trailer dropped, the Silent Hill fanbase just did the Silent Hill fanbase thing and just destroyed this trailer. Said all sorts of, like, there was like all sorts of videos made about how bad it was. The fan base was rallying behind those videos, giving them massive amounts of up likes. Anybody that had any shred of optimism would get just immediately downvoted on YouTube. It was bad. I looked at it and I was just like, not at all surprised by this. And I say this because after I played Silent Hill 2, I looked into the community more. And the community is awful. Now, I won't go into why the Silent Hill fanbase is the worst fanbase in all of everything. I'm talking about gaming, movies, music, books. They are definitely the worst fanbase of all time. And I will just tell you this, that if I do make a video about that, it will be a video breaking that all down, because it's definitely a roller coaster. But what you need to know as somebody that is just curious about these games, or likes them on a casual level, and you're kind of confused why the fan base is so rabid, I just want to tell you this, that most of the games in the Silent Hill franchise are very playable. Even the ones made by Western people. Yeah, shocker. You would never believe that by how many times the Silent Hill fan base tells you it's absolutely awful, but it's not true. All the games, for the most part, are generally pretty playable. Some are better than others, and that's how it works with video games, right? You pick favorites, and then there's some that are just like almost inarguably not as good as the other ones, but they're all good, in my opinion. And so what is this then? So then the fan base goes to, you know, anything. Like there was that HD port of Silent Hill 2 and 3. Still available on Xbox consoles digitally, by the way, and I think maybe PlayStation as well, if you really want to play the originals. They will tell you never ever to buy that. Why? Well, because the fog isn't quite right. And, also, the Silent Hill Ranch sign is in Comic Sans now. It's ruined. The entire thing is ruined. It's not. It literally, if you never played Silent Hill 2 before, that Comic Sans ranch sign is something you would never have even taken the time to notice. It's also just like a blip in what is the overall experience of Silent Hill 2. Most people walk past that sign without even noticing that there's a ranch sign. That's how just minuscule it is. But the Silent Hill fan base took with it and ran with it. And they basically single-handedly ruined the success of these HD ports by lambasting it to high heaven, to the point where word of mouth seemed like, wow, this is just a really bad port of Silent Hill 2 and 3. Absolutely inexcusable. Not going to waste my money on it. I'm telling you, once again, very playable. If you ever needed an accessible way to play the original Silent Hill 2 or Silent Hill 3 without paying exorbitant prices online for the original copies, or playing, I don't know, an emulated version, if you don't want to get into the world of emulation, then those HD ports, totally fine. Maybe one day we'll talk more about the people behind this, but that's just to kind of give you a background about what we're going into when the trailer for Silent Hill 2 Remake drops. So the fan base revolts, as they always do, as they very typically do. And they pointed at the Bloober team and looked at their resume of games and said, they can't handle this. There's no way they can do this. But the thing is that the original first trailer never indicated that they weren't going to do anything other than stick strictly to the script and stick strictly to the environments of Silent Hill 2. In what way, if you watch that original trailer, did it ever suggest that Bloober team was going to rewrite the story in their image? That they were going to drastically alter it to their perception of what psychological horror is? And that was the thing that they always kind of gave them crap for, was that like they didn't understand psychological horror like the original team does. Okay, fine, but like this is a remake. They're kind of following a roadmap, basically. Then like the next trailer comes out and they start complaining about the combat and how it doesn't look right. Bloober team immediately came out and said, this is old footage. Hey, you know, this is footage picked out by Konami themselves. We didn't pick this. And the combat is way better than this. Just trust us. Nobody from the fan base trusted them. They just continued to push that narrative that the combat looked like crap. Though I will just argue this, it didn't look worse than the original Silent Hill 2, so, you know, but the original Silent Hill 2's combat was silly looking on purpose. It was an intentional design for, you know, this, that, or other symbolism that the developers had in mind, which is garbage. Then finally, they reveal Eddie, who was one of the characters in Silent Hill 2, and they loved how Eddie looked. They loved that his image was like even creepier looking. They liked the mannerisms that he had and everything. And he also kind of spoke word for word some of the dialogue from the original game, but in this remake. And I think that boasted a lot of confidence in the fan base. And so that's when we were finally starting to see some people come around and some people saying like, oh, this actually might not be bad, guys. And that kind of caused like a civil war within the fan base where some people were like being cautiously optimistic. Oh, heaven forbid. And then the other part of the fan base was like, how dare you? They don't understand. It's Bloober team. Remember? We went over this. Bloober team. Bloober team's awful. So the remake finally comes out. It's amazing. I haven't finished it just yet, but I've gotten pretty far up to this point, and I can tell you right now, unreal how great this it might be, in my opinion. Yes, I am aware of Resident Evil 2 remake. Yes, I am aware of Resident Evil 1 remake and remakes of things like Metroid 1 and stuff like that, or Metal Gear Solid, which I know most people don't agree is better anyway. But I do think that Silent Hill 2 remake might be the best remake of all time in terms of taking the original and making it better across the board. Not a single thing that I've personally seen makes me feel like this is worse than the original, for sure. No, it has more content. It rearranges things like Resident Evil 1 Remake does so that it's not completely predictable. And also, the voice acting, I feel like Bloober Team did their homework. They really got it to the point where it should make people from the fan base happy. Doesn't make everybody apparently, but I personally thought like this was a really great compromise. The compromise being that like the fan base always kept saying that like, no, that terrible voice acting from the original game, it's not terrible. It's actually meant to be uncanny. It's supposed to give uncanny vibes. It was totally the intention of these Japanese speaking people that have no concept of the English language and wouldn't know if a line's being told strangely or not. No, they did that on purpose. It was part of the psychological horror. And it's like, okay, I mean, it works in the game's favor with the aesthetic and everything, but I don't think it was intentional. That being said, Bloober Team, I think, did a really nice compromise where in scenes where characters are clearly supposed to be portraying sane characters, you're supposed to feel as though, like, yeah, everything seems fine right now. They speak normally. And then the characters that are going through it, no spoilers, but, you know, characters that are either going through it or have some sort of other supernatural sort of element to them, they speak really strange, very uncanny, like the original game. And I thought that that was really cool. And I thought that that kind of also sort of proved the intent instead of, you know, theorizing the intent. You know, I liked that a lot. And I also liked some of the new models. If you go back to the original models, I'm like, they don't look as good. There's, of course, one controversial character who is Angela. I'll just say it. It's Angela. There's the conversation of wokeism and stuff like that. And I don't think that... I'll just personally put my thoughts out here. You can disagree. I understand that people feel very differently one way or another. I know that some people are just really frustrated with this topic in general. So I apologize for weighing in on it. But I think that it may have been possible that the face was altered to pander, basically. But at the same time, too, the original Angela was not hot. She did kind of look like a 40-year-old woman. And I know that, like, in interviews and stuff like that, it's been stated, like, oh, she was made to sound and look older despite the fact that she's 17. And I'm kind of like, yeah, but I do kind of think that if she's supposed to be younger, they aged her up too much. Like, I get the idea that, like, trauma can maybe make a person age faster or something, but, like, that's... I think that the Angela that we have in this one is fine. I don't think it's, like, better or worse, is basically where I fall on that. I don't look at her face and I go, like, this ruins the game for me. There's certainly been times where there's definitely been sort of like, let's make that character ugly on purpose, because why should we serve to the male gaze and stuff? And like when you see it, you're like, okay, you know, clearly this is like some sort of counterculture thing. But with Angela, it's sort of whatever, in my opinion. And then the rest of the characters look fantastic, infinitely better than the original models, especially James. I thought James's model is like, he's way more like likable and everyman like in this remake, and I think that that's really what the intent was of the original character to start with. And so combine that with also great puzzles, just a great pacing. One of my favorite things in games with backtracking is when you finish a puzzle and it unlocks something, and you finish what you're doing in that area, and then there's like a door, and you open that door and it takes you much closer to where you need to be next than when you started the whole route. You know, like it basically creates a shortcut to where you're supposed to go next. The original Silent Hill 2 did not do this. There was quite a bit of backtracking, but in Silent Hill 2 Remake, though it follows the design philosophy of the original Silent Hill 2, it does do a lot of that sort of like, okay, you just finished this giant chunk where you got this key and you did all these puzzles. Now let's send you back to that spot where you need to use the key, and that door will take you there much quicker. I love that. That's to me is amazing map design. So thank you to the developers for that. There's also all sorts of like new little sort of psychological little trickles of, I don't know if you call them Easter eggs, but like things that like you see it and you go, oh, whoa, what was that, or something. And the original Silent Hill 2 was great for that. I loved that. For example, one thing that's in the original and in the remake is this like whispering scene where like you just walk into a room and you just hear like, and like it freaks you out the first time you hear it. And of course that's in the remake, which is great. And then there's other things like that in the remake as well that adds on top of that. On top of all of this too, there's also been 1 or 2 added scenes that I've seen so far that were not in the original game that adds more context, so that when people play this for the first time, the impact that they're going to feel towards the end of the game is going to be that much more rich, because it adds to, you know, the believability, or it adds to you understanding or inserting yourself into the characters and world of Silent Hill 2. So needless to say, this is probably the most flushed out remake I've ever seen. The last thing I also want to just mention is the amount of clutter and stuff and detail to the environment. Wow. I thought you couldn't do this because of Resident Evil 2 remake. Like Resident Evil 2 remake showed that like a downscaled version of the detail that you would see in those pre-rendered backgrounds for the original Resident Evil 2. The original Resident Evil 2 would have like all these different little trinkets, papers, books, you know, like different sort of stuff to kind of really like make the room come alive, tell a history and stuff. And Resident Evil 2 remake simplifies it so that like the developers don't have to model as many small objects and stuff like that. It was a little disappointing because you would want to see the environments almost like one-to-one, but in that full fleshed out 3D environment instead of a pre-rendered background. But compromises had to be made. Whereas with Silent Hill 2 remake, it feels like they added more detail to each individual room. I was shocked by that. And I was like, well, wait a second. I feel like Capcom probably has a much bigger budget for this sort of thing than Konami does, than Bloober Team does. So what the heck? You know? So all that to say that I'm really impressed by what Bloober Team did here. There's an immaculate sense of care and attention to this remake. And it does break my heart to see some like old guard Silent Hill fans still not accept this game for what it is, which is just an incredible video game. So those are my thoughts on Silent Hill 2 remake so far. Gonna be doing a Boundary Break episode on it very soon. Hope you check it out. Other than that, you know, please subscribe. That'd be great. And thanks for listening to me. Appreciate it. Take care.